right, welcome to The Bridge, where Web3 meets TradFi. I'm Evie, I'm the founder at Soma, where we connect Web3 companies to institutions through tailored marketing strategies. And this series explores what happens when a Web3 solution meets institutional demands. Today I'm having with me Dennis O'Connell, who is the president of the ERC 3643 Association, which represents the largest RWA standard currently in this space and has a community of over 100 institutional members. And Dennis, we've known each other for some time now. You've been in crypto for a really long time. You've been in TradFi for a really long time, so this makes you perfect to share your perspective on both sides of the bridge, which is really exciting. But I wanted to take this opportunity to dive a little bit further into the fact that you were recently part of the SEC Crypto Taskforce Roundtable. So I would love to hear what was discussed there and what you think will be the effect of this moving forward in terms of institutional adoption.
Well, it's absolutely a pleasure to be here with you today on the bridge. You're right. I've known you for some time, and it's incredibly exciting that we get to do this. So thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a very momentous time in the United States. Believe it or not, with the association last year, I can now publicly disclose that I did a presentation to them on behalf of the 3643 Association, and it was a very different reaction last year to even this year.
Really?
With the new administration and even the new focus. The last presentation, we had over 100 members of the SEC join, Securities and Exchange Commission, and they asked great questions. They were very engaged about the standard, about the association, about what we do. And a lot of people were quite nervous about
Really?
This year, it's totally different. This year, I have to kind of fight my way into the SEC. For those who don't know, there's a ton of great resources on the SEC's website, on the Crypto Taskforce website. You can see different submissions, who's attended, who's had an audience with them, and then of course the very public Crypto Taskforce Roundtables, which I attended like 2 weeks ago, which are really consequential. And that's also in addition to what's going on in the president's administration under David Sachs and executive orders, and of course what's also going on at the CFTC and in the Senate Banking Committee. So there's four verticals for people to engage, and people have engaged. Some of the biggest names in blockchain and crypto, TradFi and DeFi, have embraced and have talked to the SEC. We are one of them as well. So we had a great time with the SEC and the leadership at the roundtable. I thought it was very provocative. I thought people didn't hold back. And I thought both Pierce and Atkins, who was the chairman of the SEC and of the Crypto Task Force, respectively, took it in stride and had really laid out a really great vision for regulation. So we'll be doing more with the task force for both 3643 organizations. It's just truly an amazing time.
So you were there last time as well. Was it still with the previous head of the SEC, with Gary?
Last time was with Gary, yes. And I could say it was a very different mood than with
can you hear
Pierce.
something about the difference?
Well, I think just leading up to the presentation, I asked members association if they would want to participate, if they would want to come. And I think globally, I got a lot of very nervous, anxiety-driven responses. This, members saying, please do not mention us at all. And some members being more open than others. And I'm lucky because of my 20 plus years in TradFi. One thing I've picked up along the way is a ton of SEC lawyer friends. And I had about 12 of them look over the presentation with a fine-tooth comb, rehearsed presentation very carefully, and really made sure to not say too much or whatever. Compared to this year, people were speaking freely, people were running, people were engaged, and both the leadership and the members of the Crypto Task Force were really encouraging and asking just really, really great questions. So super encouraging to hear. A lot of people say, the United States is behind, and certainly our association has been on the leading edge of engagement especially on the token standard side. We've led that globally. And we've done engagements with the HA Treasury, the ECB, ADGM in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. We've done Singapore, and recently we were featured in the HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority. So globally, we're very comfortable with regulators. We don't ask for legal changes. We ask to stay stay within the bounds, and we help make regulators comfortable with things like self-sovereign ID. So the United States is behind, but only on the legislative side. The actual team that was even there last year is now much more free.
Yeah. And so do you think that now with the SEC changing completely, like in terms of their stance for crypto, do you think this is really the start of something new? Do you foresee big changes happening, or do you think it's still going to take a long time?
No, I see big changes happening. I see, you know, traditional institutions, large financial institutions engaging and leading the course where previously they were very cautious. And not to say they're not cautious, they always are, but they feel far more encouraged. I see it in the legislation and in the leadership that they recognize that there's a lot of easy wins they could do. Certainly, the stablecoin legislation that just got passed is the first positive step. A lot of the cease and desist being rescinded and the Howie test letters being rescinded is a great step. And the idea that the task force has 12 priorities, which include a DeFi and providing clarity on whether a token is not inherently a security. Like I said, bigger, small, the top names in our world, whether that's Coinbase or Solana or Securitize or even, Ethereum themselves, Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, all of them are now re-examining and the former ones are leading the charge. So certainly Securitize and Coinbase are leading the charge with many others following suit. And so that's extremely encouraging to see. Have really had frustrations like all of us, but they've been the brunt of them, especially Coinbase, Ripple as well. And now seeing them not only have things rescinded by the SEC and some really great victories, but also now seeing the tailwind behind them is super encouraging for us.
Yeah, and about that, like, what do you think was really creating the major roadblocks before? Because we've heard you mentioned like legislation, but compliance is also a big issue in the past. What do you think is really changing right now that also pushes them to take institutional and adoption a little bit more serious right now?
I think the unspoken hesitation in the United States was, I think there was fear about the position of the US dollar with crypto. I think too, there was another really serious view about central bank solvency and reserve requirements and market structure stability if you enable crypto as an official rail. I think there was a lot of serious concerns about fraud and ways around the let's call it sanction framework that the West has. And so those were really serious concerns, and a lot of people are frustrated. Of course, you got the conspiracy theories of, the banks are in it for themselves and, there's some cabal or whatever. But having been on the inside, I could promise you it's well-meaning people who have very serious concerns about making sure that one of the most important institutions, our financial system, doesn't take any unintended consequences with these new assets. And it's taken almost a decade to rationalize that with Bitcoin. And that's why it's been very difficult for whether it's a state bank or federally chartered banks to handle Bitcoin. A lot of it has been adjudicated in Wyoming. And certainly a lot of clarifications on whether financial institutions can even custody crypto, even if it's through a provider. So there was a lot of serious concerns about disability of banking, especially post 2008, when all it took was over leverage, over exposure into mortgage-backed securities, a solid asset at the time that got overbought and nearly crashed the entire economy. And you can imagine the volatility of an asset either being used by a nation state actor or just by the volatility asset. If enough banks pile in enough money into it, it could become an instability mechanism. A lot of people didn't like that, and a lot of those concerns were probably overestimated. And I think the new leadership is taking that in stride and having a much more balanced view, because I think just the benefit of time and the benefit of having larger institutions like Coinbase and Ripple and Securitize come in and actually show, no, these could actually be really successful businesses.
Yeah, that really gives way more credibility, right? And you've been
Absolutely.
there at the task force last year, you were there this year, and probably next year you'll be back again. But what if you think already about this meeting, what do you hope to see there?
What I always say to people, because I talk to a lot of DeFi and blockchains who are submitting, because I for many years in my banking career I did this. I had the privilege of interacting with the various feds, the BIS, the ECB. You know, I'm very comfortable. Back in those days, you would have like five lawyers on either side of you, and that sort of thing. Communicating to regulators at the highest level, especially with sensitive topics like that. And certainly in the nonprofit with the association, I've gotten even more experience globally with it,
Yeah.
which has been fantastic. So a lot of people ask me, and what I say is go in with something specific. If you seek a regulatory change, make sure that it's well thought out. Make sure that the ask is reasonable, and be open to their skepticism. But I find a lot of projects and organizations and foundations, my recommendation is let them get to know you. Just do a very simple educational thing. Let them see what you do. Let them be aware of you. Make sure that they have the landscape the same way you think about yourselves, in the same way and let them connect the dots. So I think that's been something we take for granted with other jurisdictions, that they're very open to working with foundations. Certainly ADGM in Abu Dhabi has been a leading one, even creating the DLT foundations regime, which frankly has allowed projects like Solana and IOTA to migrate their foundations, which is truly an incredible thing. Imagine that, a regulator encouraging a token, or encouraging safe harbor, encouraging a foundation. So a lot of the projects, because they've been so afraid of the SEC, and for a very good reason, it's very helpful for them just to get to know the SEC. And if they do have a specific legislative ask from the SEC specifically, make sure to concentrate on that.
Yeah. If you would describe the current SEC sentiment in 3 words, what do you think their thoughts are on institutional adoption?
Bold new future. That's the 3 words off the top of my head. It's truly going to be my second one will be RWA meets DeFi.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be the way we thought blockchain as a mirror of the traditional world. A lot of us who kind of got it early realized that was never going to happen. And my favorite analogy is, if you work for a railroad for 20 years and suddenly you work for an airline, not everything is transferable, right? And that's the way I feel about banking. It's what works for centralized institutions doesn't work for DeFi, and DeFi is the future.
Yeah. I actually recently read a research report by Allium, and they had a really nice graph there that basically showed how TradFi thinks about DeFi and their importance over the long term. But what I saw there is that they actually think it's going to be important in like 10 to 15 years, which to me just sounded quite crazy. I'm like, the innovation is taking place right now already. Why do we need 10 to 15 years? But what do you think about that? Do you think that's the timeline that's a bit more reasonable, or do you see change happening a bit faster?
Whenever I get asked these questions, I always start with my three predicates: what jurisdiction in the world, what asset class, and what financial activity. Because depending on that is going to be a wholly different answer. If you're talking about tokenizing money market funds at scale, like we're seeing with Securitize and Ondo, that's happening now with Apollo, with Bremer now, with BlackRock, obviously, very serious institution. That is now. I mean, today, right now, you could go on Securitize, buy Buildle and get S Buildle, and trade on DeFi. There's major announcement today where R3 consortium that raised $107 million and his board was made of all the largest banks, just did a major partnership with Solana and bridging their 10 billion institutional assets to Solana. So things like sovereign wealth, like central, a CBDC, or like, what I call like money held in central banks, like BIS, that's like your 10 years, if ever, kind of spectrum. Public securities like the stock market and the NASDAQ, that's probably closer to 5 to 8 years, because that's an infrastructure scaling limiter. There's a lot of regulation on that.
Yeah.
And then if you go down the risk curve to sovereign bonds and treasuries, that's up there. Certainly DTCC publicly is doing a lot around that. So is Ondo. And then even private credit, like my company works in, we're an asset management firm out of Abu Dhabi and Hong Kong. Our assets are on the private credit side. And we just talked about the news with Apex, the fund manager. So that's obviously happening closer. So it isn't going to be like, oh, let's wait in 10 years. I also have heard this 5 years ago. I've heard, take 5 years for adoption. And one thing I can tell you is no one knows the future. It's not linear. Things happen in waves. They don't happen steadily. It's like nothing, nothing, nothing. And then you get a whole series of months where like a whole bunch of stuff happens. And frankly, I think we're living in that right now, this quarter.
Yeah.
So it's not linear. And I think we have no idea what the next 5 to 10 years looks like.
Yeah, I love that. It's not linear, and also like generally innovation takes time to be adopted. And the fact that it's not linear and like going like this, it basically to me means that if you're like a DeFi company, for example, you just need to be ready right now for whenever the moment comes, right? Any final
Absolutely.
words you would like to share?
No, I mean, it's been an amazing year for the association. As
Yeah.
mentioned, we grew up to 102 members. We signed some really amazing partners, and we are doing even more behind the scenes. So, lots of great stuff to come from that, and we're really, really excited about it.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for sharing your insights. And it was always a pleasure. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I thank you again. Take care.
Bye bye.